So let me do a quick 5-minute intro. Thank you for joining us today. Please save your questions for the end and mute yourselves until the Q&A. So for those of you who are first time with us, yes, we started as regular function as a service developers, but very soon we realized we could help businesses by working smarter, not by sprinting faster in the Scrum terms. And we started defining serverless not just as a tech stack, but as a pragmatic mindset, a way to focus on the business value. And I know that sounds fluffy, so in simple terms, it comes to how you triage problems. So in general, if the platform has it, use it. If the market has it, buy it. If you can change requirements, then do it. But if you have to build it, then own it. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the first 2 points. You don't want to be like the two guys in the cartoon. So this broad definition of serverless allows us to explore various IT topics. And if you visit youtube.serverlesstoronto.org, check out all the educational events we've curated over the last 7 years. Many of them are still highly relevant. And if you have a non-promotional altruistic topic to share, just message John and me, and we're going to pencil you in. And if you think we are forgetting to cover some of the topics, please DM us or mention it in the survey. We're always open for fresh ideas. Actually, one such idea was presented to us to cover Postgres. So Postgres is like a reliable family member, always there, always dependable, but too often not fully appreciated. So sometimes in the summer, Dennis Magda, author of the book Just Use Postgres, will visit us to change that. And I've also invited Indy Dev Dan to come to the meetup, but instead of accepting invitation to teach here, Daniel, he provided a deep discount for his principal AI coding course. So if you're looking to get into AI engineering, this is a fantastic opportunity. We got 2 discounts available, 5 coupons for half off, and then 20 coupons for 33% off. And they expire at the end of the March. So take the note of the coupons here. I will also share instructions how to redeem the coupons at the end of the chat, in the chat. And last but not the least, I want to thank Mining Publications for supporting us over 5 years. They generously donate a title at every meetup. Please complete the survey bit.ly.slsto to qualify for the raffle at the end of the session. For those of you who do not win, Mining has provided 45% of coupon code for all their digital products, and scan the barcode and enjoy the saving. So now, before I hand the mic to our guest, let me answer the question, why this session? So many of us are caught in the enterprise AI adoption catch-22. So companies are restricting access to public AI tools, and that's for legitimate reasons. And developers, we feel like we have our hands tied behind our backs while we are waiting for official AI strategies. And at the same time, same concern has triggered many IT teams to start building expensive GPU-powered data centers and quickly forgetting everything we learned during the last 10 years of the life in the cloud. So I personally believe there is a critical misunderstanding happening here, plus that we have an easy workaround for the problem. So first, the misunderstanding. Public cloud is not the same as public LLM. So the solution is not personally to build private AI infrastructure, but to leverage what we have. And all of you already have a cloud provider that sells secure, tenant-isolated AI services with same guarantees like any of the other services they sell. On AWS, it's available through Amazon Bedrock, on GCP through Vertex AI, and Azure has similar offering as well. Plus, clouds provide access to all the frontier models without the operational burden. They offer serverless as well. Now the workaround. So the open source tools like Continue the Dev, they guarantee that your data stays within your tenant. They will not send the data to the third parties services like public ChatGPT. And Continue the Dev provides GitHub Copilot-like experience, but allows you to connect to any of the approved LLMs in either your cloud tenant or on-premise. And I discovered Continue the Dev out of my own frustration. So I've shared it with my teammates first at NASDAQ last year, now at Siemens, and they liked it. So since many of you are struggling with this exact problem, I invited Nate. co-founder and CTO of Continue.dev, to show how you can connect Continue to any LLM, then to explain under the hood operations of Continue.dev, to share his vision for AI coding assistance, and then to try to answer any of your security concerns and questions during the Q&A. So, Nate, thank you so much for joining us to address these critical enterprise challenges, and the floor is yours. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll throw up my screen real quick, but yeah, this is my first time here at Serverless Toronto, so thank you, Daniel. I'm like really happy to be here. I hope to keep it pretty conversational and pretty brief, and maybe even leave more time for questions. Just like if there's something in the middle where anyone wants to raise their hand and adjust my direction here. Again, I have plenty to talk about, but happy to kind of move toward whatever everyone's interested in. Yeah, like you said, I mean, AI coding's it's a thing, and we're really excited about it. And I think we've kind of seen developers as a whole come around to like, there's something here. It's really changing how we're coding. It's making certain things much cheaper. It's making them much more fun. It's making work more sustainable and fulfilling in some cases. And it's also like a new challenge, which, you know, again, challenges are fun. It's like learning a new programming language. This time it's English. But there's a lot to it, and it's not always easy. So I'm going to cover some basics of what have we seen. We've got a pretty interesting viewpoint where we're constantly talking to enterprises. Daniel had mentioned Siemens, and a handful of very large orgs that we're talking to, all the way down to small couple-person startups, and just, you know, what am I seeing? How have we tried to solve it, and what do we think is coming next? So I guess starting with roadblocks, like this is defining the problem, and Daniel's done a pretty good job introing here. You know, the biggest one, absolutely keeping data in your environment. So, I mean, I think there's nothing that's more sensitive than code in a lot of cases. Like, that's your core intellectual property. It tells a lot about how your application's running, you know, for security purposes, for IP purposes, and so much more. Like, that matters a lot. And so I'll definitely touch on that. Another one is ensuring control over models. So, you know, we've got an explosion of open source models. There are many ways you can run them. You can decide you can trust OpenAI, all the way down to say, hey, we've got our own GPUs lying around. Let's utilize those. And again, seeing a ton of that, seeing a ton of let's leverage these beefy laptops that we've got in Ollama, and, you know, increasingly models are capable of running on those things, but, you know, you've got licensing concerns, you've got cost concerns, you've got security concerns, data concerns. All of that's a thing. And so, like, knowing what are the models being used is a huge deal that we're seeing. And lastly, you know, I know someone asked about how do we convince that, you know, these tools are actually super useful. And, you know, one of the things that will have the opposite effect, you know, I think at least quite often in the beginning you'd hear, well, like, it doesn't know about my code base. You know, all of my work is understanding this incredibly specific code base. And so that's one of the main problems, is how can we get it to like actually understand your work, actually provide tailored suggestions. So another huge roadblock, but also a huge opportunity. So we'll touch on that. There's a lot more. I've seen a bunch of others, but curious here, like, first spot for a little bit of interactivity. Like, is there anything else y'all have seen, major roadblocks, anything you would want me to touch on? Like, what have been the biggest roadblocks for anyone here?
I think, Nate, related to this for me has been the idea of governance first, and not that it's a bad thing, but we can't even get started until we have a full governance process. I hear that from cybersecurity VPs, right? And they're like, and I ask, well, what research have you done into AI? None. Like, so how are you going to govern? So I don't know. I mean, it's tangentially related to what you're talking about, but it's like, how do you get there incrementally, right? Get started. But it is really about that. It's like everybody's trying to like make sure that, you know, that their data, their code, their, you know, their proprietary information, rightly so, doesn't get out there in the wild, or get, you know, training for future LLMs.
Very similar.
You said two words in there. Oh, actually, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying very similar concerns in my company. Like basically we're allowed to write test code and stuff like that, but any of our proprietary code, we're not allowed to use Copilot. We're not allowed to use tools like this because they don't trust the fact that yes, there's agreements that it's not being used to train models and not going anywhere, but they don't believe that basically. So that's where we're at. I think pretty common with most companies.
Perfect place to bust that myth.
Yeah, that's great. I think 2 words that were thrown in there. One is governance. That's like the absolute word that we hear all the time. And 2 is incremental. They seem at odds, to be honest. It's like, governance is kind of that like top down, how to make sure that like we've got controls on everything, whereas incremental often feels like this, how do we kind of from the left, like developers first, like figure out the use cases here, figure out how to use it. I don't think they have to be at odds. I think there's definitely a way that you can get the governance and work incrementally at adoption and kind of figure out the use cases one by one. So maybe I'll try and touch on that theme a little bit, but it's a great +1. So governance is a key word here, it sounds like. Cool. Yeah, and I see a mention in the chat, like personally built some full stack projects using Cursor IDE, use GitHub Copilot all the time, played around with Amazon Q, currently working on Gen AI projects with AWS Bedrock and OpenAI and Azure. To the point someone else made earlier, it's like, again, how do we like prove that there's value here? I think one of the really great things about tools like Continue and the others that you mentioned there is that, in your free time outside of work, we're seeing a lot of people kind of prove the value there. Have the fun, like at-home projects. I think they're really great for that, especially like when you're building from scratch. Some of this agent mode stuff is quite incredible at showing value there. Obviously very different from in a production code base, but that's where I think like luckily there has been that opportunity where these tools can be kind of dual use, in work, out of work, developers bottom up learn the value and start to talk like, hey, I think there's something here. But yeah, a little bit about Continue. So a lot of the roadblocks that y'all have seen are kind of what we're trying to tackle. And so we started off a little right around 2 years ago. We began and open sourced our open source VS Code extension, quickly followed it up with an open source JetBrains extension. And so this has been our core the whole time. If y'all haven't seen Continue at all before, let me make sure I'm sharing my whole screen real quick. Entire screen. Boom. There's my family. There's my screen. I think VS Code is on the screen at this point.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So I mean, basic features. So, step 1 was autocomplete. People became accustomed to Go Copilot and the Ghost text. And so here I am with a completion inside of Continue. Again, kind of just another example. There. So, code completions, as you've probably seen before. Basic feature number 1, basic feature number 2, chat. So, what is this file? Just have it answer real quick for me. Basic feature number 2. And what I think has come to be basic feature number 3 would be edit. And so this is, say I want to maybe make the header orange and much larger, really make it stand out. So Continue is going to go ahead and stream a diff into my IDE. This looks great. A little bit of margin, a little bit of extra bold, and a little bit of orange. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. So that's what's kind of become like the basic staple features that people come to expect. So I think maybe nothing groundbreaking here, just like the basics of what is Continue. And so gonna move back. So one of the things that's been different about Continue from the start is, very early on, we were excited about local first. And we were excited that you could run local models. I think Code Llama came out very early, and since then it's just been an explosion of different models. And from the beginning, we've kind of said it makes sense to be able to bring your own models. Whether you want to call it BYOM or not is up to you. But when I'm over here in the extension, in this particular assistant, I've got called Sonnet, but a little switch over. Which one did I have it? And yeah, anyway, here I've got a couple of models here. So like I have choice over what models I want to use. I was able to define them in a config file for continue. So like the idea here is there's a lot of control. If I want to use Quinn Coder with Ollama for autocomplete, that's what I've got there. If I want to use Claude Sonnet, I've got it there. If I want to use CodeStroll, the really great autocomplete model from Mistral, I've got it there. And again, kind of going down. And so we've always been excited about like, A, how do you keep up with the progress? A lot of new models being released all the time. B, how do you really experiment with them and try out more than one? And C, like you want to run it in your own environment, whether you trust Bedrock, you trust OpenAI Azure, you trust OpenAI, you want to run it locally with Ollama, you want to set up your own GPUs, all of that. So I think that's the basic intro I would give here to continue. And so that file I'm just clicking around in, call it config.yaml, is pretty powerful. There's a lot you can do. Almost anything you can think of to customize, you can customize, but it's a config file. It's nice. Developers love it sometimes. They also hate it sometimes. It's a bit much. So one thing that we definitely found was, while a lot of people were willing to put in that work to, kind of dig around our docs and figure out what's going on and add these models, and it was really powerful for them. There reaches a point where, you want something that's easier. You want something where you can benefit from kind of the community building out a lot of these building blocks. And so you're like, why is it? Yes, Daniel, absolutely. Swap out the keys. It's just a little bit too hard. And there's a lot of work being done like within multiple different companies twice. So why are we duplicating this? And so one thing that we came to was a hub of building blocks was something that was missing. And so this is something about a month ago we came out with, and I'll switch my screen here, is hub.continue.dev, where we basically said, this looks a lot like a package manager. You've got NPM holding all of the node packages that you use. Maybe it's PyPy holding your Python packages. And in this case, for config YAML, there are a lot of building blocks that people are starting to use and maybe share with each other. There really wasn't like a public forum to do this sort of thing. And so where we're heading with this is, say you've got a really great set of rules. You figured out how to get the language model to work really great in Angular. And you came up with this bullet point list of here's just what it needs to know, and then it writes excellent Angular code. This hub is the place where it's extremely easy to basically not have to deal with the YAML file. And so we're looking forward to seeing like, a lot of people are figuring out how to customize these things. It's rules files, it's prompts, it's adding documentation for the language model to be able to see. More recently, it's model context protocol. I think there's a big ecosystem kind of growing here. And so that's one of the things we're really excited about. But again, it all kind of comes back to that first building block that pretty early on we caught, which is models. And so, is it, I want to trust these guys? Is it, I want to, go down to Ollama and use Quinn 2.5 coder for autocomplete and go entirely locally, or maybe I go with LM Studio, or maybe I want to set my own endpoint and, I add a block so that, my team doesn't have to do that same thing over and over again. So that's part 2 of continue. So to kind of summarize here, open source IDE extensions, hub of building blocks on top. Think of it like an NPM package registry for building blocks to make custom AI code assistants. And that's what you get out is custom AI code assistants. I'm excited about this. I think that we're seeing a lot of it. More and more of the noise is about what's this? What are the tools that you're giving to the language model? Can it really actually take action when you want it to? And does it actually know about your code base? And so all of that is what goes into a custom AI code assistant. So I think actually probably the most interesting thing here is a quick demo. It's best to see it in action to understand what happens. So I'm going to switch over to this demo org. I've got, in this organization, I've set it up with a couple of assistants that are they're ready to be used by anyone in the org. One of them is this Java Elasticsearch assistant. One is the Python data science and machine learning assistant. And just to give a sense for like, what does it mean to go custom? What's the benefit there? Like, why am I talking about all of this? I'm going to ask implement sort. And very basic question, could go in a lot of directions, but here you're saying I'm getting something in Java. It knows this is what I care about. It knows that I care about Java Elasticsearch. So like there's a very, very obvious trajectory here. And so what was nice was with a super concise question, didn't have to type out a bunch of extra information. There it is. There's Java. Now, if I switch over to the Python one, and I'm going to say implement sort for me, implementing it in Python. So it's night and day. It's completely different when you're trying to get that aha moment, which is kind of what we find is really important for developers adopting it. You want them as soon as possible to say, oh, like I understand why this is useful. It did the thing that I was trying to do. And the more you can nudge it in that right direction from the get-go, especially as an engineering leader, that's when we found success. So looking for that aha moment. And this wasn't actually hard to do. So I open up this window and let's see what's inside of this custom assistant. And here it's the YAML file. It looks a lot like a package lock in many ways. What we're pulling in here is a set of rules. And so it says, you're an experienced data scientist, you specialize in Python-based data science machine learning. These are the libraries that you commonly use. And so right off the bat, if I'm going to ask for some visualization, it's going to know right away to go to matplotlib. No questions asked. So that aha moment comes much, much faster. Cool to see the +1 from Tim. But yeah, so this is something we're super excited about. And maybe one more, again, I think like examples are the best way to show this sort of thing. Been doing a little bit of experimentation, kind of as I'm playing around with demos. And one of the really exciting things that I found is, actually, let's make this a fun demo. I'm going to pull up an old version of the Continue website. This is ancient history. Please don't criticize it too harshly. It was very early on. So yeah, easiest way to code with any LLM. It's kind of where we came from. Hopefully our new website looks a little better. I want to add a banner. So, recently we launched version 1.0 of Continue. That's the one you're seeing here. And one of the great things that came along with that was tool use. You hear sometimes about vibe coding. I don't know if that's my preferred term, but what I'm going to ask it here is, can you just go ahead and make a banner? I want to announce the version 1.0 of Continue on our website. And let's try and make that happen. So I'm going to say, I might have this in, there we go. Let's create a banner to announce V1 of Continue extension launching. I'm going to press enter, and there it's going to go ahead. And, well, that's kind of strange. So I don't actually know how y'all feel about this ASCII art banner. Personally, I'm impressed. I would actually give this, as far as ASCII art goes, there's a little bit of jagged edges, like a 9 out of 10. I think it's pretty impressive. But I wanted this on my website and not an ASCII art. So cool, like 10 out of 10 for effort, but 0 out of 10 for I'm not committing this to my code base. Now, that was like a completely vanilla assistant, no rules, no customization, just kind of flipped on default Continue. What I want to switch to is this one here. I'm calling it my Continue website assistant. I've defined it over here in this YAML file. Just it lives locally here. Hopefully this kind of sparked some like interesting metaphors, but .continue folder /assistants, and I've got this website.yaml. So here's my Continue website assistant. I give these rules. I just said, like, you're working inside the Continue website repository. It's Next.js. It's using the app router. pretty important to know, not the other one. Here's my layout so you know where things are, and use these best practices. Short and sweet, and it didn't take me long to write this up, but the difference we're going to see is pretty substantial. So let me go ahead, same prompt, and we're going to let this thing spin. So right off the bat, knows where to put the file, creating a banner.tsx. Chat. I understand and really pictures you mentioned it. As you can picture a radically different AI coding workflow. Yeah, Tim, I think I more and more am coming to find this myself. Hopefully this example is useful in showing that. So moving things around on my small screen. Yeah, it wants to create a new file. Looks good to me. It's gonna make sure that I actually want to do this. I click continue. We sort of took that into account in the name. And again, now it's reading my layout file. So kind of like the root of the site wants to figure out, is that where I should put it? Looks like yes, it's gone ahead and said, let's throw the banner in here. Boom, added it to the file, and all right, we got hot reloading. So here's a banner, continue V1, it's out, try it now in VS Code. Did it get the link? If it got the link, that would be quite impressive. It did, okay, awesome. So there it is, just drastically different, like ASCII art was cool, not what I wanted. This is precisely what I wanted, and just a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of nudging, and the moment feels magical to me. I think it tends to feel much more magical when it's doing what you want it to do. And so that's been one of our big focuses, is just having that control, making it custom, getting to that aha moment much more quickly than you would otherwise. I got a question here. Does continue generate multi-file projects or work with one file at a time? Absolutely can generate multi-file projects. The way that we've found this works is, models, more recently, a lot of the labs, a lot of the open source models have had stronger emphasis on this tool use concept. And so that is to say, what's really going on under the hood here, when it says continue wants to create a new file, and I say yes, and it goes ahead, and it says continue wants to read app layout TSX, it says continue wants to create a new file again. We've given it a handful of tools. You can see them here. It can read files, it can create new files, it can run terminal commands. Here I've made sure that it asks me first before doing that kind of thing for obvious reasons. It can view subdirectories, a repo map, a little bit of searching the code base. All of that is the direction that we're seeing this going. So if it wants to edit multiple files, it can do so. It just calls the tools. If it wants to scaffold the code base, it can even do that by calling something like create React app. So it can combine deterministic terminal commands that are built for scaffolding code bases alongside its own kind of intelligence. And to answer that follow-up question by Daniel, absolutely yes, MCPs. Maybe I feel like I've been running on with this demo for quite a while, and I want to get back to the presentation, but come the end, when I talk about what we think is next, I'm gonna definitely hit that. So yeah, anyway, that's continue in a nutshell. Worth noting, I showed the autocomplete earlier, but I am running locally on this one. So when I ask for this, I don't know what I want to say. It's just description here. This here, syntax highlighted. I'm going to press tab and get it there. So that was all local. That was WinCoder 1.5 billion. So there's some really awesome open source models out there, especially for local autocomplete. But anyway, so that's continue. Demoing is fun, but let's move on. So I think I covered this to an extent a little bit. And I think we got the perfect lead up from Daniel. So what are we seeing? How do you build custom? Like, what does that mean? How do you integrate your external knowledge? Because you probably have a lot of it if you're working at a large company. And so we're seeing three things. I think I've showed one of them. For external knowledge, you want rules. And so rules are every request I send, like these are the basic guidelines of how I write code, the basic knowledge about my repository. I always want the language model to know these sorts of things. That's what rules are for. And so under the hood, they're going to the system prompt, which is a special message. Maybe I'm preaching to choir here. A special message sent to the language model. It's been trained to follow your instructions given there. Type 2 is prompts. And so this is where, maybe it's more of like a one-off task. I think Daryl, it might have been you saying testing is like a huge use case, right? We like trust it for our test code. Honestly, same here at Continue. Like we very heavily emphasize language models for testing. It makes them cheaper. It makes them better. Maybe review is another use case here. But if you wanted to do something like, let me move over to a different custom assistant. I want to maybe, actually, this way to show this is probably here. There we go. Loading, here we are. Hub.continue.dev. Pretty transparent here. We build a lot of stuff open source, so no secrets. So this is an example of a prompt where we've said, hey, like we write an end-to-end tests all the time. They're pretty structured. It's got a decent amount of boilerplate, and we always structure it into selectors, actions, and tests, and it's just how we write software. And so we're able to say, hey, like, please write this end-to-end test. Always follow these rules. Here's an example. Here's an example. Here's an example. And it really writes out almost like, think of it like a recipe. And so you can kind of, you hear the high level steps you can follow and let the language model fill in kind of color in between the lines. So that's the second one. So it could be code review. It could be writing unit tests. It could be, analyzing some code for security issues. It could be anything else. Kind of the second way to customize these one-off tasks that you're finding. And lastly is docs. So hallucination, kind of the keyword here, but language models are great when you give them knowledge of what you care about. If you don't, sometimes it can be up in the air. And one of the best ways to do so as developers is, go read the manual. And so same thing for language models. Have them read that thing, and they're going to have a much better time. And so, adding docs is definitely a huge deal. And what that looks like is here, maybe I want to say using pandas library, and I want to say like, how do I load a CSV, right? And so in that case, it's going to be able to tell me straight from the pandas docs, kind of cited sources, what's going on, and where can I learn more. And for deeper integration. So I think these are really the in order. Like number one is get your rules right. It's the like most basic level. It's English in, English out, or whatever language you're choosing to use. Just natural language in and out. Prompts, same thing. Kind of once you get into building them for that specific use case. And three is docs. Recently, again, MCP kind of becoming really exciting. And this is where you get into custom tools, custom integrations. Do I want it to be able to read my, current Kanban table in Jira to like see what's my work this week or something? We're seeing people go pretty far with this. I talked to someone the other day who was building, I don't know if there are any Elixir developers here, but an Elixir developer that I was on a call with who said they had a really great compiler, and he wanted to feed back that information from the compiler into the language model. So he went ahead, built an MCP for it, got this really beautiful feedback loop going where, it would write the code, run the compiler, get the feedback, improve the code, and was seeing great results with that. So this is kind of what we're seeing. This is when we talk about like external knowledge and really building something custom. These are the high level ways of doing that. I want to pause. Whenever I'm talking for too long, it feels fishy. So does anyone want to nudge me in some direction or ask any question? I'm keeping up with the chat here, but otherwise, let me know. What do you think? we'll keep rolling on. I'll keep on going. I'm happy to.
So
But Tim,
yeah, just wondering. So you mentioned prompts. So basically, provides a way for you to manage a prompt library that you can dynamically pull in. I wasn't clear on that part. Similar to
yeah, that is actually, yeah, totally. I
okay.
think that's, yeah, one of the ways to look at the hub. Prompt library is definitely the term that you could use. We're taking it further, you know, if you think that like there are prompts, there are rules, there are docs, there's the model context protocol, you might have servers, you've got your models. And so all of these different building blocks, and we're really coming from the perspective of like, what is it you need to like have this holistic all-in-one AI code assistant, um, and just kind of one-stop shop for that. And on one hand, it's really great that we can have kind of an ecosystem of people working together on this. It doesn't make much sense to write your rules once and then never have the community benefit from them. But on the other hand, like making all of this possible, I think you saw over here, I've got my .continue/assistance folder, like all still possible locally. And so as much as we want to make that possible, where, you know, up in the hub, we absolutely can and should collaborate with people. When you want just these quick iteration cycles, or you're kind of taking those baby steps from a governance point of view, or you know, in networks where you know, it's either not approved yet, or like this is just the way that you use continue. That's where we came from, is local first, and something we want to stick true to.
Well, this is cool because I really think like this year, aside from agents, like integration is the name of the game, right? So we've got all
Yeah,
these great AI tools, and I think now the issue is like the reason I was excited about what you were explaining was my current workflow is a little bit like this. Like I write some these MCP tools, and then I leverage some open source MCP tools, and then I create my own custom rules, right? And then I'm working on a small team that
yep,
also we can share some rules, but we're doing kind of like we don't have a great way of doing them. Then I manage my own prompt library that I also share with some other people myself, but it's basically mine. And then I have
yep,
MCP tools that let me do the various integrations and things like that. And so I'm working in my AI coding assistant, but I'm kind of like I have different. What I'm trying to say is I have different methods of integrating different types of things, if that makes sense.
yep,
One method for rules, one method for MCP tools, one method for like
yep,
interfacing with my Jira and my Confluence and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yep, absolutely. I mean, that's good to hear. That's a good plus one. And like, it's the same problem we ran into. Like we're, you know, we want to be able to do all of these things. There are so many different places you could do them, and you know, post them on a forum online, share your rules on Reddit, share your MCP server on GitHub. But then like, how can I just click a button and be done with it? Or you know, or even better, how can I paste it into a file so I can version control my stuff? In the chat, got something. For continue, Daryl said running continue local mode. Olap on my laptop, yes. Yeah, so that was fully on my laptop. I've got a MacBook here, and I could shut off the Wi-Fi if I wasn't on a call with y'all. It would drop my connection. Otherwise, I'd do that for the demo. But um, yep, it is entirely locally. If someone is going to use the configuration for the models. So a couple ways of going about this. This is what it looks like in that raw YAML format. So I've just said, hey, like here's my provider. I'm using Ollama. Here's the model I want to use. It's Qwen 2.5 coder, 1.5B, and let's use that for autocomplete. So that's the extent of the configuration. If I want to do that through the hub, the equivalent way would be head over to, give me a second to log in my computer here. So go to Olama here. It's another way of going about it. So, I could say, here's my Next.js assistant on the right. I want to start using Olama models instead. So I'm gonna, click to add the block. There it is. Maybe I want this one, etc. Kind of play around, just like adding them to your shopping cart. And then at the end of the day, it's going to give you that same YAML format that you wanted. Follow-up question, what is MCP? Daniel sent the link. Cover that maybe if I have time or later. And then, does this code generator tool allow code templates for certain features such ORM mapping, building REST APIs, complex thing? Yeah, boilerplate / code pattern blocks. Okay, this is something that's super interesting to me. I wrote a prompt yesterday that I can maybe see if I can find. So quite often, I've used a tool called TypeORM, which is an ORM for a database. And it has a tool to auto-generate migrations. And so like, that's pretty powerful. You can use a simple CLI command. You want to name your migration, and then it kind of handles the rest for you. And what's nice about some of these directions with tool use and what you can do with prompts is, on one hand, you can have the model run that script for you. And so whatever small amount of input is needed, say you need to name the migration, if it sees your diff, it can figure out what the name of that should be, goes ahead and runs the command, which is fully deterministic. So kind of working hand in hand with the tools that you would use anyway as developer. And then you get done with that, and this deterministic tool has generated your migration. Looks pretty good, but usually migration tools, it's you got to actually give it a human look afterward, because they're not perfect. They're close to perfect. And we found you can do pretty good with a language model. And so this was a prompt I wrote the other day, which was just, hey, please review the current diff. This includes updates to TypeORM entities. Take a look at the migration, just like let me know, was there anything in here I did wrong? Should I give it another look? Here are some things that like commonly go wrong in a TypeORM migration. So just one example, but I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about, to be honest, is you got this like interplay between deterministic code generation tools, the same stuff that's always been useful, and language models, and they're not at odds. Absolutely should use them together, and it's kind of a magical experience. MCP is all I hear about these days. Yeah, I can try and say it fewer times here. I don't know if anyone's been counting how many times I've said it, but please don't. So I'll move to a slide that doesn't have that on it. Before I keep going, again, I think this has probably been the most fun part, is getting some feedback and just talking with you all. So anything else before I storm forward? Cool. Then I'll storm forward a little bit, and I want to speak to a little bit of what makes it possible to go local first. So I think that's one of the big things, at least from the agenda, that y'all want to hear about today. And unless I hear otherwise, that's what I'll assume. So under the hood, what's going on? Why is it that Continue works when you turn off the Wi-Fi or you're fully air gapped and you've got local models, and it doesn't need to send off your code to some mysterious service to embed an index, etc. So like, what's going on there? And so I'm going to cover a little bit of how we do indexing and what that means. And hopefully this kind of demystifies a little bit. Question. Oh yeah. So cheap and efficient local indexing. What does this mean? So again, back to the question I think I called a roadblock. So the roadblock before is you wanted to know about your code base. That's super important. And how does it do that? Oftentimes it needs to kind of be able to retrieve. There's this retrieval process where you ask a question. Maybe it's, how do we do auth? And it should be able to figure out that there's this file called auth.ts, or it should be able to figure out that something called login.ts, or maybe it searches around and in your package JSON finds some third-party service that's relevant. So this being able to ask questions of your code base is retrieval. And so there's a lot that goes into it. into this, it's tool use. So like letting the model figure out on its own what's going on. BM25 search, something that's been around forever, just kind of a typical search. Embeddings with embeddings models, and re-ranking is kind of taking that initial pool and turning it into final results. And so the way we're able to do this is all locally. We use a vector database that lives on your machine. And so when you open continue enabled indexing, it's going to kind of zip through your file system, make sure to ignore the stuff that's ignored by your git ignore, following the same patterns of like, don't touch the .env, don't touch any of the secrets, don't touch anything that's in the .git ignore, or the .continue ignore is also listened to. And go through, make a plan. What do we need to index? What's there? And do a little bit of embedding. So we kind of use this called a hybrid approach. You've got embeddings on one hand, kind of like a messier abstract way of retrieving. You've got BM25 for exact search. So we're building up a search index locally, and then tool use. So we're able to build up the structure that the language model can use to kind of use its intelligence and ask about what's important. Combine these all together, and you basically get this pool of relevant files that probably contains anything that might possibly be interesting. And then you take a re-ranking model, which basically says, here's my user input, here's an example file, combine them into a score, 0 to 1. How relevant is this actually? And so it's kind of this more precise, takes a little bit longer, but you do this last step. And then finally come down to this like whittled down set of answers about what's important. And so the way we're able to do this cheap and efficient indexing locally is a great vector database called LanceDB, runs locally. It lives in a file on disk. It's pretty space efficient, pretty time efficient. It's going to do near instant retrieval. And alongside that, a little bit of making sure that when you switch branches, for example, and only one file changed, we're not going to re-index the entire thing. So incremental indexing is what we call that, and making sure to use content addressable storage there. So I think that's just one of the little under the hood pieces of what makes it interesting. Like why is this even possible to have a code assistant entirely local? But what's next? So I think I'm coming up on time here, if not already went over. So apparently I can talk agent mode. So again, agent mode, vibe coding, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if those are the words I like to use, but it seems to be the ones that are out there. We're seeing a lot here, and it just comes down to being able to customize. And this is the direction that we think is super promising, is just like when you get it going on that longer trajectory, you want to be able to nudge it in the right direction. And that's huge. The next thing we're seeing is specialized models available to everyone. So some of these really like frontier features that you're seeing, like tool use, like next edit prediction that you may be seeing some, like tab diff models from certain people. You've probably seen fast apply is one of those things happening out there, and more. This is kind of why we decided to go this hub direction, is we're seeing the community start to build these things. And so I think even just recently, Zed, great IDE, came out with a tab edit model and open sourced it. So more and more, like we're seeing fine tuning is getting cheaper. People are investing in LLMs for code, and we're seeing this proliferation of these really like niche use case models that previously you might have to trust the cloud for, but we think that these are absolutely going to come to everyone, and you'll be able to either run them locally, run them on your GPUs of choice, or run them in AWS. So excited to see that, and excited to see the ecosystem continue to grow. I think Tim said this might be the year of integrations. I think that's probably true. I think it's the year of people learning how to write rules. I think it's the year of learning how to kind of tame the beast of language models. And I think it's the year of doing that together and sharing what we learn. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And that's what I'm hoping to see. And oh man, I went over. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the feedback, and the chat's been super active. It's been fun. I think it's time for questions.
Thank you so much. So who's going to start first? You can unmute, guys.
Yeah, nice sharing, Nate. Quick question. I believe the best AI model for coding using Continuum is Cloud Sonnet 3.7.
Hmm.
What about the
Yeah,
local open source models? So which one can be the best one?
that's a good question. So I'll give you maybe a more complicated answer than was bargained for.
No problem. Yeah, what about, let's say, among 20 billion to 34 billion, something in this range?
Awesome.
Which model?
Yeah, cool. I think probably Quinn Coder, Quinn 2.5 Coder 32 billion is probably the one I
Okay.
choose in there. It's the higher end of the range. It's solid. I mean, when you talk about the edit feature and the chat feature, it does a pretty solid job. It also has tool capabilities. I think that's something they'll improve in the coming few months. It's not quite there yet, but it's very good. Very, very good at chat.
Yeah, I tried that model with the other coding tool, Klein.
Yep.
It didn't do the job at all. Probably I'll try to continue.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's where I say, like it's there for chat. It's not quite there for tool use. So when we talk about like this agent mode, and I think that's what Klein is really built for.
Mhm.
It's close. It's close. And you can like you can see the sparks. It starts to get the right thing. Uh, it's not quite at Claude level, but I do know that them and a lot of the other labs are focusing pretty heavily on tool use, just as we're seeing that become like one of the primary use cases. So I think that'll change. I think that'll change. We might see Llama 4 in the next few months, who knows?
Yeah,
And so that could
cannot
change
wait.
everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. So fingers crossed there. I think it'll be pretty fantastic year for open source.
So any feature or best practice saving the API cost, especially for 3.7 Sonnet, this is very expensive.
Yep. It's all about using the right model for the right job. And so we've got, I said there are a handful of primary roles that you care about having model for. And the two obvious ones are one is chat. So, I'm in the chat window and I want to ask it a question about my code base. And number two is probably autocomplete. And the key thing to understand is like completely different models. If you try and use a chat sized model for autocomplete, it might work. It's not trained to work for autocomplete. Like, say you wanted to use, I'll just say GPT-4, like some kind of frontier, extremely large model. It's actually going to give you worse responses than something that's an extremely small model. It'll be much, much, much cheaper. And so identifying the roles for the models that you want is definitely a huge deal.
Yep.
If you're going local first, everything in Ollama, I tend to say, stick with the Quinn family and go Quinn 1.5 for autocomplete, Quinn 32B for chat. There are a lot of ways to do it. It just totally depends on your use case.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel, can I enable extended thinking mode in Sonnet 3.7? We've got a PR open for this. Not merged yet. It's great PR. It's a really good one. If I can actually dig that up. Might be here.
What is extended?
But short
thinking
answer,
mode?
yes.
Oh
You
my
can tell
God.
it.
It's like intelligence. You have an architect, not just a developer. So it thinks through solutions, competes, does one or two iterations, says, I think this is better approach. So you wait for it,
Yep.
but it's like having a senior colleague with you. You're not alone.
Yeah, so this is the PR up one of our contributors made. It was a big one, so we haven't gotten around to reviewing it completely yet, but turned on thinking, and here you can see the model's just going to think a little bit before giving a response. And so, if you give it harder problems, it will think harder actually and kind of understand like the complexity of the problem, and it'll just keep going until it has figured out that it's onto the right thing.
John, with the other companies, you have to choose thinking model versus normal model. This one, you give it number of tokens. I want you to think this long, so you'll assign a budget. Like with the DeepSeek thinking model, I asked it, tell me purpose of life in one sentence. It went forever.
Yeah.
Like here, you can fine tune like how much thinking time you allow it. So it's not black and white.
Yeah. So to follow the Daniel's point, we'll have this thinking the cost will be increasing huge Is there any feature to catch the prompt or any other cost saving features on using the continue?
Yep. Caching is huge. So we have caching built in. If you're using a service that enables caching, that'll just work out of the box. And that's probably the biggest one. One that's kind of counterintuitive that we found is actually, you know, before it was all about managing your context. And so if you're trying to include the whole context in every request, you've got basically input tokens and output tokens contribute to your cost. Output tokens are a bit more expensive, but you tend to have way more input tokens than output tokens. And so quite often those add up to the majority of the bill. And it's all about being really precise about what you put in the context. So if I can, you know, point the language model to exactly the file or exactly the line of code that I care about, that's going to be way more efficient than throwing the entire code base in context. And that's kind of a habit to be built on the developer end, or something that we've tried to emphasize in the tool. But the other thing that we've found is that when you enable agent mode and just kind of go run off and create files and search through your code base until it finds what it's looking for, if you can just tell it how the code base works and what's there, so it doesn't need to search, it just sees the repo map and says, boom, that's the file I care about. Let me just move forward with my task. It's much more efficient in terms of output tokens. So, you know, we're hearing the funny stories of, you know, I was using this tool and spent, you know, $10 in my first day. There are ways around that, and I think it again just kind of comes down to customization.
You use the keyword repo map, and like, can you explain people that? And you even reference Aider implementation. So can you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got a visual example here is probably best. I'm using some strange, non-typical ASCII white space character here, so ignore the little yellow boxes. But you know, here in the sidebar is the tree of my repository, and here is a representation of that in text. So, you know, you just imagine it like you're a normal developer, never seen the code base before, and you're asked to accomplish some feature. If you can't go through the list of files, that you might have a much harder time. And so we found this to be one of the #1 things that can make a language model more effective.
But when you're first starting out, like let's say you just install the plugin and you're ready to go, do you have to craft that rules file from scratch, or will it scaffold it based on what it sees in your package dependencies and all that stuff?
You're ahead of me on this one.
Okay.
We're working on it this week.
Oh.
So yeah, that very much should be possible. I've seen a handful of tools out there that might help with that, like third-party services that have kind of made the same observation. You might even be able to ask and continue, actually. So short answer, yes. Medium answer, we're working on it. Long answer, absolutely. And I think that's going to be really interesting going forward.
John, I never got to it. I keep manually poking it. So the rules are next on my to-do list. Next question.
Questions here. Philosophical difference that the Continue team had versus what we see from Cursor and Windsurf for others, for example.
So I'm not sure.
I think the core what we're
Does
trying
that
to
make
do,
sense?
it does. Yeah, and I pause. I'm gonna let my thinking tokens or thinking mode turn on here for it's like, what is the meaning of life type philosophical question? But I think I have a good answer coming for you. I think it's about choice. I think it's just about choice is probably what it would boil down to for me. When we started, it was about what model do you want to use? Do you want to run it locally? Do you want to run on your own GPUs? You know, are you a tinkerer and like you've got your home lab set up and like that's exciting and you want the choice? Or, you know, do you want this AI lab versus that AI lab? Or do you want this model for autocomplete and this model for chat? And now it's rules and there's kind of this infinity of choice because you can express in natural language. And now there's even model context protocol and choice over what tools and integrations I get. I think choice is the big thing. We want to make it easy to make your custom choice, hence the hub. Like it shouldn't be hard. but you should be able to make that choice. And I think it's something that's been true forever in dev tools. Developers know what they're doing. I think that's kind of one of the things you've got in common from everyone in this profession is like they know how to write code, they know how to set up their tools because they understand what's going on there. And so give them the choice and they can actually do something really incredible with it. It's maybe what it would boil down to for me.
Okay, thanks. I think of things too, like when, and maybe this isn't intentional, maybe it is intentional, but a lot of the people that I see really getting jazzed about Windsurf and Cursor, a lot of them aren't developers. There are people who see the YouTube videos about how you can create the Harry Potter chatbot, right? And they think they can become a software engineer overnight. That has not been, I've been doing this for a little while, and that is not my experience. And it doesn't seem like that's your target either, but I could be wrong. And those kind of things that I'm talking about, like the heavy agentic kind of angle on things, even,
Yeah.
excuse me, I do think it's powerful, but it's not the total answer in my experience.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And they've built incredible tools. And I am all for more developers in the world. Like writing code is one of the most fun things in the world for me. So I remember when I was first learning, and it was great fun. And whatever online courses I found that helped me through the way, the level of tool we have to help early developers or people who don't have an intention of becoming developers, just want to build software. Like I'm really excited to see like so many more. But then you've got this separate problem, which is like industrial size software, completely different ball game, and that's really what we want to go after. And I think that's where choice matters, like so much more even.
When you mention industrial software, like you go in there, there is so much proprietary tools, documentation to go through. So in your demo, you showed how to add pandas documentation, but how do you point to, Doxygen generated website about the software you have no clue about?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. So maybe the best way to show this would be give the example. So if I go to the IDE, you've kind of got this way of here's early innings of looking at my package JSON and suggesting some docs here. Not quite there for rules yet, but I could say let's check out the continue docs. Maybe I'm on some internal network where https docs.continue.dev is resolving to something specific for us. Could be the case. There are many other ways this could work. I want to go index that. We do have the ability to kick off this indexing like fully locally, and there's a setting here for it actually. If I were to say use Chromium for docs crawling, now that I'm reading this, it'd probably be a bit more clear, but this means like basically kick off local docs indexing. And so it's just going to happen like on your computer. If you've got access through the network, it will work. So that's one answer of how to accomplish that.
I never tried it, but that's a good one. And then sometimes you have references to external code bases with kind of just dump of stuff, like it's not even documentation. Would you use docs or you would reindex that as if you were there? Like I've seen SourceGraph dealing with code bases that go beyond your project you open because there is some knowledge there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think this goes to the idea of choice that I'm hopefully not harping on, but is a pattern for us is we're actually seeing it is also very similar to what I said about like this point. Specialized models available to all. Not a model, but a service that's been of like pretty great interest is this indexing and this be able to ask questions of my code base or any code base. It doesn't need to be the one I have locally. And we've seen a couple of companies come out that have said, hey, like we're going to offer this as a service, grab your API key. Maybe we do on-prem deployments. I know that some of them do. And their one job that they're laser focused on is let's get you awesome industrial size code base retrieval and like answer questions in a really excellent way. One of those is Greptile. There are a handful of others out there. But being able to plug that into Continue is kind of what we want to make possible. And so there's like, however you can think to make that happen, depending on the needs. If you need to go on-prem, you need to go on-prem, and that might be totally different. If you want to use Greptile, that's one thing. If you've built, and we've talked to quite a number of people that kind of identified context gathering as like this super high impact thing for them to do. And so they've taken Continue and said, let's not repeat the work of the extension. That's been done. There's a lot there. It's really hard. But context, now that's our special sauce. That's what's unique to us. And so they'll go ahead and build a server that like handles retrieval. They can plug it into Continue with a custom context provider or an MCP. And so that's one thing that we've seen.
And when would you choose custom context provider, your style versus like the fashionable one, new one, MCP?
That's a good question. TBD. I think it's so new. It's so new that I don't know how much guidance I can provide here. I think
Okay.
it's something you can try either way. I think auth is a little bit harder with MCP right now. I think they're mainly intended to run local first, so it kind of depends on the setup that you want. If you want a server that's running in your environment but not like on the laptop, then you might go with the custom context provider.
Thank you. Wow, time flies. I didn't even feel we are close to scheduled time, but doesn't stop us for staying longer if you can too. So at the beginning, like when you were talking about Hub, so the reason, like I don't use Hub, like I didn't even know it existed until we started talking about this call. But what I've seen with at least LangChain and other companies, there is a like using cloud for LLMs, but your own tenant cloud is not a problem. But the problem becomes sharing the prompts, sharing the knowledge, because in the age of AI, people are defining prompt as a unit of knowledge work. So is there a way, so there is more, like they tried with Langsmith, I think, it's still available in the cloud, but they offer on-prem installation. Langfuse allows on-prem installation. Is there an idea to allow this hub that continue to dev to run in company, because there are teams who want to share, but they don't want to give it outside? Like, is there a future there, or I'm just throwing ideas?
There is, yeah. And so the metaphor we're sticking with here is think of it like a package manager, think of it like a package registry. So it's super common for, it's hard to do your job as a developer without access to like NPM or PyPy, whatever package manager of choice for your language of choice. And quite often the solution there, when you need to go fully on-prem, is to mirror that registry. And so you kind of create your own internal copy of that. And it could be in JFrog, it could be wherever else you want to host those artifacts. And we kind of see this very similarly. So while we don't currently have the ability to mirror, it's super early. We launched this in the last few weeks. That's kind of the way we're thinking about this. So it's like a registry. It's absolutely about pulling in the packages that you need. And before then, it's all possible locally. Like again, got the local assistant file, all possible. You could even go copy paste from the hub if you needed to take inspiration. But it's kind of how we're thinking about it. It's about collaboration. It's about basically building out this registry of building blocks for working together to make awesome assistants.
Awesome. And all my configs are in JSON. Now I see YAML. Do I need to switch, or like this is just one of the flavors?
What was that?
So the configs you were demoing configs in YAML. I use JSON type. So is it a new switch, or I can choose one or the other?
Yes. New format. Same deal. We switched over because it looks a bit nicer. It was a bit messy in the JSON, particularly for multi-line strings. YAML handles them much better. So that was why we made the switch. But like both can be used until we eventually might deprecate.
Thank you. We have a repeating question from Tim. Maybe you can. He was away. Can you?
Yeah, local. So the one I'd said was QuinnCoder 32B. It's really great. Another one is if you're up for using it, DeepSeek is one of the more solid reasoning models. So again, kind of trade-offs, like it'll take its time and really think for you, but it'll also give a really well thought out answer. I think if you mentioned specifically editing, yeah, R1 exactly. Quinn is probably a great one there. Probably the best so far for tool use. But again, I think that will like change pretty quickly here.
Hey, folks, only 3 of you did the survey. If you need the link again. Or paste your name here if you're lazy to go for survey. So we have a free mining raffle as well. Any other questions? I thought I knew continue to dev, but now that I heard you, there is way more to get excited about it.
Yeah, one more question. So the limitation for 3.7 SONET is the number of tokens. Do we plan to extend the length of the total tokens or the context for continue?
You mean context length tokens?
That's right. So when I go a very long conversation, it goes some issues are, just through some error. So I look forward to a longer context or a length of the conversation.
Okay, I wonder if that may just be some kind of bug, depending on how long of a conversation you may be having, how much the code base is in there. Actually, I would be interested in following up on this and seeing if we can do something, or at least give a more clear error. But we should be able to use the max context length that's available with the model.
I think I saw the same error today. I like 3.7 as well, and I keep like stuffing even images. Like I got this error. Why? Tell me. And then eventually was error context too large, so I just removed attachment or reference.
Yeah.
Cool. I should take a look at this then. Thank you.
So, so about code base, like, can you explain people when they reference that code base how it's like, does it search every file that was indexed, or there is a meta tag like similar to GitHub Copilot at Workspace? Okay.
Yep. I think the way to think about it is if you have a task like find all instances of me using, say, snake case when I should be using camel case, like find everything, like every single time in the code base that this happens. That's not going to work well because it's not going to actually see all of the files. It's just going to kind of search generally for what are the few that might be relevant. Now, if you have a question that's more, I'm looking for this particular thing, or I want to answer this question that needs a little bit of context, that's great. So the example I often use is just plain and simple, how do we do authentication? And so probably what it's going to want to do is find whatever basic auth files you have, maybe the login page, maybe wherever you're handling bearer tokens. And so it's able to retrieve a small number of files, use those files in context, and then answer the question. I don't know if that answers at all what you're getting at, or maybe I can expand more.
I think so, but it feels like behavior has changed over the year or years. Like I didn't check under the hood, so.
Yeah, we're always trying to improve it. I mean, it's there are various ways of going about it. We got the embeddings, and so we do that embeddings-based retrieval. We do exact search type retrieval. More recently, tool use, so like letting it grep through the code base. So definitely maybe changing. Open feedback always.
Okay. And then the database for indexing, like I know sometimes I mess up multiple instances, and then in the past I used to have to remove the index file, but I noticed it's a SQLite format. Is there any use for us browsing through it, or it just for your purpose? Like it's extensible. Like why would I want to navigate through it? There were some instructions, use the browser to view for it. And then like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think generally we made that added the link in there just because people are curious sometimes, and it's like, what's going on here? What's under the hood? Can I peek at it and like, do I trust what's going on? I just want to know how it works. And it's interesting and fun, helpful to debug sometimes, but that's
security audits. Okay, so if your InfoSec asks you about that, give them that file. So that would be a good use case. Okay. because I read everything you publish and then try it, and I was like, what is this for? Like, perfect. So we are almost at the time. So who else wants a free Manning book? Like Nate, I'll put your name as well. Anybody else? Like you keep asking questions while I prepare the free raffle. No questions?
I put a question in the thing. I was wondering if, like, if you say, "Hey, I'm having trouble with cores in this particular piece of code," is it smart enough to say, "Oh, okay, you did this wrong. You're missing this piece of thing. You didn't set some variable somewhere or something like that."
In fact, I think I did this exact thing about a handful of months ago. So I can tell you from experience that, yeah, it definitely is cores pretty down pat. I'm sure there's some server framework out there that it's maybe not seen before, but I think we were using Express. I was like, hey, I got this error. I didn't think much about it, just tossed it in. And sure enough, it said, you're missing this cores header for this other domain. So I think the answer is pretty safely yes.
Cool. I'll have to try it with AWS. See how it works.
Nice, nice.
So let me share the screen then to see who else wants to win Manning products. Am I sharing? Screen number 2. So I did a couple of names that I saw in the chat. Anybody else who would like? They have really good odds here. Anybody else? Or
We're
I should
not seeing the screen, Daniel.
you're not seeing the screen?
Or I'm not. I don't think. Am I
Hang
doing
on a
something?
sec. No, I didn't finish. I clicked on screen 2, but I didn't share it. Apologize. So now, come on. Okay. Here. Anybody else wants to be? Okay, I don't see any names in the chat. Good luck. Alison, you were quiet. I saw a name I pasted.
Quiet.
You with us? Congrats. So all you need to do is paste your email in the chat, and I will introduce you to the nice folks from Manning, and they will move any of the digital products you choose into your account in manning.com.
Okay.
So that's from me. Nate, thank you so much. This was really fun for me personally, because I'm using it day in, day out, the tool. Like some people would say GitHub Copilot is okay, but the problem is with personal GitHub Copilot, you're sending data to Microsoft, to whoever you're sending. With corporate GitHub Copilot, that big companies like I know RBC in Canada or Siemens has signed the deal, Microsoft guarantees that it's not going to go outside, but they offer only one LLM. And I don't want to use GPT-4 or like Sonnet Code's better. So I keep defaulting to continue the dev. So.
I found that with it often tells me, I say, hey, I'm trying to fix this thing, and it goes and gives me the same answer over and over again. It just says, oh, you just have to do this. And then and then finally I say, no, you've told me that 3 times already. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, literally. And then it goes and says something else that doesn't work either.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So try continue. Like I hope you're going to be safe at work. And often, like using these tools, like corporations are like do not use, but it's like speeding on the highway. Like there is a gray area. Like like really, like as they say, 100 limit, but I never got ticket for going under 115. This 15 kilometers over. So basically, the reasoning is they don't like data to go out, nothing, but they like data in. So as long as you don't use anything proprietary for work, with continue even with other models while waiting for approval, you can learn stuff. So not exposing anything, just chatting with it legitimately, because it's AWS approved tenant, GCP approved tenant, or Azure approved tenant. So that's kind of, I'm thinking, this is not like legal advice. Do not get in trouble. for following it, but as long as you do not send anything out, getting advice back should be okay. Like it's one-way street with companies that I've seen. I don't know, Nate, what's your experience?
I have an advantage. I just work for myself, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So I just have to yell at myself.
Then you have plenty of tools to choose from. Like this is for lockdown environments where continue is
right.
the only savior. And I got used to it, so I'm not even looking at other options. So thank you, Nate, for making it a good tool for me. Any other closing thoughts? Any other questions? We don't have to leave yet.
Thank you very much. I've never tried it out before, but I definitely will try it out now, and may have more questions later.
Thank you. Thanks again. Nate, you're on mute.
Yeah,
All the best.
thanks all for joining. I would say, any questions, feel free to join our Discord. And if I don't answer your question, someone on our team will. And if someone on our team doesn't answer your question, huge community probably will. So, so I'd hopefully maybe see one of you all there. And thank you, Daniel, again for the invite. This is awesome.
Thanks a lot.